Hey guys, welcome back to Honey in the Rock, episode 82. I'm Sophie, and this is Jennie Lusko. Um,
Hello.
Jennie and her husband are the pastors at Fresh Life Church in, where do we say?
Montana.
Montana, not Minnesota, Montana. And she also has a podcast. It's called Hey, It's Lusko's that she does with her husband. And I didn't know this, but I found out that she wrote a book back in 2020 called The Fight To Flourish. So she has all of the cards, a mom, a wife, all the things. And I'm so honored that you're here chatting with us today.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for having me. What a sweet invitation to get to be on your podcast. And a little bit before we started this, you were saying that you're a senior in high school and you have some time on your hands. And I'm just amazed that you're wanting to fill that time with something so sweet. And I love the name of your podcast too, Honey in the Rock, the
I
best.
appreciate that. And it's such a sweet God thing that it's like, I wouldn't be doing this on my own. And it's just something the Lord was like, here, I gave you this story for a reason, and I'm going to give you this opportunity. It's been sweet just to get the wisdom from people that I would have never got to talk to. I listen to your podcast. I mean, religiously, it's like every weekend. When you first came on, I was like, my heart started racing. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Like, she can talk to me. But just learning wisdom from people who I either wouldn't have known otherwise, or I wouldn't have been willing to ask. Even like my grandma, like I wouldn't have just asked what my grandma's testimony is if God didn't give me this little platform, and I would have never actually got to talk to you and face to face or whatever this is.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's been so sweet to see what the Lord has done.
So
Um,
good.
but we can just dive right in um, to your testimony, and you can just share what the Lord has done in your life here.
Well, thank you. Gosh, I grew up in a Christian home. And so when I was 8 years old, my parents took me to this. I don't think you probably know who this is. Maybe you do. He was called Salty the Singing Songbook. And it was like way back in the day. And
Yeah,
this was like the beginnings of like kids worship.
yeah,
And so they took me to this concert, and I mean, I was in church, so I knew Jesus, I knew about Jesus, but this was just a moment where it was like drawing a line in the sand. And I remember that night after we had come back from the concert, my dad prayed for me, and like he always did every night. And that night I was like, I want to give my life to Jesus, and
yeah,
I don't know exactly what, I mean, I was 8 years old. I don't know exactly what this means, but I know that I'm a sinner, and I know that Jesus came to this earth, and him being God lived this life, perfect life. And then he died. He chose to die on the cross for my sins. But then he rose again on the third day. And again, I mean, I'm 8 years old. I still don't fully understand all the things now because I don't think we're meant to.
yeah,
Um, but that was when God captivated my heart and I gave my life to Jesus. And it's interesting because I think you often hear stories of people who live their lives for themselves, and they chose poorly and they made all these wrong decisions, but then they met Jesus. I kind of think of like Paul in the Bible when he was religious, but he didn't know Jesus. And
yeah,
so he did all these things. He was murdering Christians and going after them, but then a crazy experience happened where he saw Jesus, he met Jesus, and then
right,
his life was forever changed.
yeah,
And I feel like for me, it's kind of been like a slow burn
yeah,
where literally like I gave him my life to him when I was young,
mm,
and then it was like little bits at a time, little things that God was like wanting me to surrender over to him. And I'll say the first thing that God was kind of checking in my heart as I was growing older was with boys. Like
yeah,
I think when I was in kindergarten, I was when I first started loving boys.
right, yes,
And like there's this game that we played in kindergarten called Girls Chase Boys. And so literally I was a part of that game every time,
right,
like chasing boys, and when you capture them, like you kiss them, and I'm like,
right,
no, why am I doing that? Um but I feel like that was literally the beginning of every year in elementary school. I think I had my first boyfriend, which all we did was hold hands, but
Right.
still, like my first boyfriend in fifth grade. And then every year it was like I had a boyfriend, or I liked someone, or I needed to be liked by someone. And it was just this. And looking back, I just see it's clear looking back that I was just wanting to be known. I was wanting to be seen. I was wanting to be loved. And it's interesting. I had a good dad,
Right.
but there was just a hole that I was filling with other things, other people. And so that was even a slow thing in my life. When I was in fifth grade, also, my mom took me to this purity conference, basically
Yeah.
for girls. And I didn't, I mean, I'm still pretty naive about some things, not about
Right.
this anymore, but in terms of like sex and
Yeah.
marriage and everything, I didn't know exactly what it meant to keep myself pure, or to save myself for my husband, but I knew that I wanted to do that. And from this conference, it was like, hey, you're worth the wait, and you have a future husband who God's going to bring to you, and save sex for marriage, and it's going to be amazing, and all this stuff. And so I did, and then throughout high school, I still dated here and there. Um, but it was so amazing. Like as I was growing in the church, and um, I was part of small groups and my youth group and worship, and just plugged in. I
Yeah.
just, like, it was little by little that God was just captivating my heart
Yeah.
even more, and teaching me and growing me and maturing me, and showing me that He's the one who satisfies and nothing else. Um, and so I just look back and I see His faithfulness,
Mm.
and how He was changing me and helping me. And then when I was 19, um, September 11th happened. So 9/11 happened, which was, I know people know this, but when the Twin Towers in New York were hit,
Right.
and it was September 11th, 2001. And I was like planning on moving to Albuquerque, New Mexico, to do
Yes.
this internship with a church there, because missions, God also captivated my heart with serving Him on the mission field when I was in
Yeah.
eighth grade. And so I was
Mm.
just like, I'm going to be a missionary in Africa one day, or Asia, or, I was like, I'm going to go far for Jesus.
Right.
And so I was planning at this point, when September 11th happened, I was planning to move to Albuquerque, New Mexico, to be a part of this missions internship.
Mm.
But my plan was to move September 18th, but September 11th happened. And then my mom gave birth to my twin baby sisters on the 14th. And
Yes.
so there was this week of just like, what is happening? Like the world
Right.
is falling apart. I'm abandoning my mom. My parents were having struggles in their marriage at the time. I felt like I was abandoning my mom. I'm the oldest of 8 kids, so I was really helping her out with stuff. And then God's calling me to move to New Mexico. Like,
Right.
what the heck? Like,
Yeah.
this doesn't make any sense. I'm abandoning my family, and the world's falling apart.
Right.
But I went, and in the process of this, the internship I was going to be a part of was a year long, and part of the like rules of the internship was no romantic dating relationships.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, God, this is just me and you this year.
Right.
I'm going to grow closer to you. And I don't want to be distracted. I just want my eyes like on you.
Right.
And, um, and then I met Levi halfway through that year, and he didn't make any such promise to the Lord. So
No.
we were serving together in youth ministry.
Yeah.
And but what was so cool about that, and this is all this to say, like what was so cool about that was that God knew what I needed
Mm.
when I was going to meet my husband. Like He knew
Right.
that I needed to just have time and space, and not rush in, and not um and really get to build a friendship. And I'm
Right.
so
Right.
grateful. Like God's timing is so perfect, but I'm so grateful that I was able to just still focus. It was a
Mm.
little bit harder because he was kind of a distraction, but
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm not going to date you. And you know that. So you're not going to ask me. But then, anyways, so he asked me to date him the night that my internship ended. And then, and then I could just keep going on, but I didn't want to keep talking if you had any questions or anything.
Yeah.
But I'm just, I just am so grateful. Like, I guess my blanket amazement about God is just that He is in control
Yeah.
and He's good.
Right.
And in the midst of all the things that we're in or struggling with or whatever, like He is near and He's there and He leads us and He's our shepherd. And I'm just so grateful for that.
That's so good. There's so many things that I love about that. I love the idea of we want to be fully known and
Mm,
deeply loved. And it's easy to chase that in boys. Even from a young age, we're just like our sinly desires might not fully understand what we're doing, but it's just this idea of like, this feels good. This feels like it's satisfying. But then realizing it's not. And I went to, when I was in fifth grade, my mom took me to a like a girls' purity thing. And it
oh
was
my
like
gosh.
girls wear purple and like we got these headbands. And but it was just this idea of we find our worth in Jesus first,
Yeah.
and the man that's going to love you is going to come along and love you well as also. Um, but that feeling of being deeply known isn't going to come by just having a boyfriend, which is so interesting to be in the season of life I'm in right now. Of I'm 18 and I've never dated before, and it's like,
Mm,
what am I doing? Like I gotta figure something out. But just like nothing has been right yet.
yeah.
And then it's like, oh, I'm so lonely. If I just have a boyfriend, it'll fix everything. But it's like, no, if I love God well right now, that is going to, satisfy my soul, not
Yes.
another 18-year-old boy who, can text me, and so it's just
That's
so
so
interesting.
good, Sophie.
And it's good to hear from your perspective now. You're married and it's, you're going in life. And it's like, no, remember when the world didn't end when I had to, not date somebody for a year.
Yeah.
And then the sweetness of God to be like, have that rule technically on you to like, you can't date, to where it was like, if this is going to be it, it has to be right. And I love that it was the day your internship finished. It was like, we were waiting. We followed these rules and we were waiting.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so good. Um, and then I love that part. Okay, if you don't have to share about this if you don't want to, you can just move on. But you share a little bit about losing a daughter. What did life look like after that? How did your relationship with Jesus change or strengthen or grow just after learning loss? Was your first reaction to like run away and be like, what the heck, God? Or was it just like what did that look like?
Yes. Well, it was all of the above
Yeah,
because I think you've experienced loss in your
yeah,
life.
yeah,
And I think anyone who has experienced loss knows that it's messy
yeah,
and it's like everywhere and your heart feels like it's just exploded everywhere and you don't know like up from down, left to right, like especially when it first happens and it's just a shock.
right.
Um but yeah, so our daughter Lenya, so we have 5 kids,
Mm.
one in heaven, Lenya, and then we have 4 on earth. And actually, our oldest is 18. She's your age, and
Yes.
she also has not dated or had a boyfriend because it just hasn't like she's had a lot of crushes, but just
Right.
not. It hasn't been the right thing, and I love that. I think that's just beautiful. Um, and so our second daughter, Lenya, when
Mm,
she was 5, it was 5 days before Christmas and she had an asthma attack
mm,
that I mean it was normal. Like my husband has asthma,
yeah.
Olivia, our oldest, has asthma, and
Mm,
it's just something that we live with as a family, knowing like this is how we handle this. This is the medicine. This is the nebulizer. Like all the different things. But that night she was with my mom. She and Olivia, Daisy, and Clover are 4 girls, and then we have a little boy at the end. He's 6.
yes.
But they were all with my mom, and Levi and I were on our date night because we do Thursday night date nights,
I love that.
and we had just finished wrapping Christmas gifts,
Mm,
and that week was kind of busy in our life. It was just a big week with we lead a church, so staff, Christmas party, and church planning stuff. And my husband was studying for his Christmas Eve message, and
right.
so we were looking forward to Friday, which was our family day.
Okay.
Um, and Levi was going to take Lenya to go. She had saved up money, and she was going to buy Christmas presents for her
Mm,
sisters. And and we were going to have like, we were going to go ice skating and then have this like fancy dress up dinner night. And we were just looking forward to it because it had been such a big week. But Thursday night, she's with my mom and we come to pick up the kids, and Lenya, um, she is on the counter because my mom was trying to give her medicine, but she wasn't taking it.
Mm.
And she looked at me when I walked in, and then she passed out, and she was on the counter. And then Levi came in, who was doing CPR. We were doing all the things,
Yeah.
and then it was just suddenly and shockingly,
Mm.
she wasn't with us anymore, but
Mm.
she was with Jesus.
Right.
And that just dropped us in this spinning whirlwind of grief that is just horrible and awful. And but at the very same time, and this is what is so mind-blowing about who God is
Mm.
and his love for us and what it's like to be in the midst of pain and suffering with him,
Mm.
is that we felt like we were in this tornado, this whirlwind, just grief stricken,
Yeah.
but in the middle of it, like we knew his peace. And the
Mm.
Bible talks about that, that the peace of God, it passes understanding.
Right.
Like it's far beyond what we can fully understand and even explain. And
Mm.
so we experienced that. Like our the floor was taken out from under us, and we were like broken. But then at the very same time, like we had hope, and
Right.
God was with us, and we knew that we weren't alone, and there was a peace. Like we look back at pictures from those days, like literally the days. And we had Olivia was 7 at the time, Daisy was 2.5, and Clover was almost 1. And like there were just pictures of us like laughing.
Right.
There were also pictures of us crying, but
Right.
there
Yeah.
were just moments where it was like, why? How are we even able to like smile? How are we able to like? There's just like even now looking back, it's like that passes my understanding even
Right.
now, you
Yeah.
know.
Yes.
And so, and I guess that's just what I would say is that like when we trust God, He can take us in the midst of the tornado of trauma and
Mm.
pain and
Yeah.
sorrow and hurt, but he's with us at the same time. And so, and we have hope. And it's like, we have hope that because Jesus went before us, like Jesus died on the cross, but then he defeated death and then he rose from the dead and he's alive. He's sitting at the right hand of the
Mm.
throne of God. Like he basically paved the way for us. Those of us who believe in Jesus,
Yeah.
when we die, that's what's going to happen to us. And so there's hope. And then there's all, like when you cling tightly to the scriptures, and when there's verses that say to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, like
Right.
there's strength and there's hope and there's peace.
Yeah.
But then on the other side of the exact same coin, there's terror and there's fear and there's pain and there's sorrow and there's struggle
Yes.
and there's grief, and it's just both. And I think that we can, in the midst of our struggle and our pain and our sorrow, which looks different for other people because someone might be struggling through their parents getting divorced, and that's painful.
Yeah.
Someone might be struggling through the death of a loved one. That's painful. The loss of um, a job or a teacher or whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
pain is pain, and
Right.
so when we have that pain that we're in, we are
Mm.
also able to rest in God and
Right.
to be led by him. Like I love Psalm 23 is my favorite psalm.
Yes.
I would encourage any listener to memorize that because it's easy to memorize and it's something that literally like I'll just add in my prayer like all the time. But
That's so.
literally it says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death,
Mm.
I will fear no evil, for
Mm.
you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And
Right.
there's so much about that psalm that is just comforting because
Yeah.
it's saying that God is our shepherd.
Yeah.
And when you learn about how sheep are pretty dumb and need
Right.
someone to lead them and
Yes.
feed them and all the things, like God is that for us
Yeah.
no matter what. And we can walk through the valley of the shadow of death,
Mm.
and we don't have to be afraid
Right.
because he's with us.
Right. That's so good. I love that it's a both and.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be this season of life is terribly hard or this season of life is so good. It's you there can be laughing and there can be joy that's turned into dancing, but there's also going to be anger and hurt. And I think that's so good. And I think it's also really sweet to see um your story, and it's not all butterflies and rainbows. It's not all perfect. There's this death and there's this hardship, but it's how is God still good? And it's because God's goodness isn't defined by our circumstances. And I think
Yeah. That's
that's
so
so
good.
sweet. And then through your whole story, this whole time, this shepherd keeps being brought up. The
Mm.
idea that Jesus was your shepherd when you moved to New Mexico, even when it didn't make sense,
Yeah.
and that he was your shepherd in this hard season of life. And that should bring us so much comfort. And
Yes.
when the hard thing comes, because it will come, that He is our shepherd and we have purpose even through it. I struggled a lot with that. Like right after my friend passed away, it was like, what's the point? If you're
Yeah.
depressed, if you're anxious, and it's hard to get out of bed, what's the point of even doing life if it wasn't for Jesus? If
Yeah.
we didn't have something greater than ourselves living for, then why would you do something hard? And I think that's what's sweet to see in your story and so many other people's stories, that hardships don't really compare to each other because everyone's is different. I was at the beach this past week with my friends, and we've all been through something very different, but it's all been so hard. And a
Mm.
friend is having a struggle with somebody in her family. Another one, her brother has a brain tumor. My
Mm.
friend died of. We all have these struggles, but none of them were like hers was harder than hers,
Yeah.
and this one is worse. It's just no, this is hard, but we all have this hope that when we're in the valley of the shadow of death, we don't have to fear because He is comforting us. And so,
Yeah.
um, it's just so it's sweet. And then as we're leading up to Easter this week, I think that's something really sweet to reflect on. I listened to you and Levi had a podcast, maybe it was like two podcasts ago, I think, but it was about preparing your heart for Easter and the season of Lent. And so, kind of transferring to that, what does that look like for you? Just to this Holy Week, on Friday, it's Good Friday where Jesus is crucified. And it's like, how is that good? Oh, because of Sunday. And so, um, how do you like prepare your heart, and how have you been just resting in that, not to just fly over? Because it's easy for me to be like, Sunday's coming, just this week doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That I'm reading in Matthew right now, but just seeing like the Lord like leading up to it, and it's just like I need to focus on this week too. So what does that
Yeah.
look like?
That's so good, Sophie. Gosh. Yeah, I feel like it's looked different throughout my whole life. That recently we as a church, we we have in the past done like 21 days of prayer and fasting at the beginning of the year, which has been amazing and awesome and so good. But recently, not too recently, but in the past couple of years, we've changed it to be before Easter. Um, and it has been so beautiful, like
Yeah,
so amazing to take things out of my diet.
right,
And everyone's kind of doing something a little bit different. We encouraged our church to fiddle with food a little bit, like to do
yeah,
something with food, like whether it's take out sugar or whatever it is, but like just do something with food because that makes a huge difference when
right,
something that you will normally go to or crave or whatever, when you don't allow yourself to have that for a season, like
right,
it messes
yeah,
with all the things. So, but whether someone's not doing social media or whatever, but that has been really a strengthening thing in my own walk with the Lord and my own prayer life. Like
yeah,
to be leading up to Easter, I feel like even more than ever this year, I'm also reading this book by John Bevere called The Awe of God.
yeah,
And it's all about what it looks like, what it means to fear God and to live in reverence and awe of who He is.
yeah,
And so that coupled with we're reading through the Bible in a year as a church too.
yeah,
And we're in the book of Galatians right now. But like
yeah,
I feel like God's just so good to speak in surround sound. And
Right.
when you give him a little bit, like when you give him some space, when you give him a little bit, you offer just something to him, he's just so faithful to, it's hard to even explain it, but like he's just faithful to lead you and to teach
Right.
you and to speak to you. And so, like, things that I'm learning in my quiet time, it's like my husband speaks about it and he doesn't even know that I'm like learning about this, but he like speaks
Right.
about it from um at church, or someone else that I'm having coffee with like talks about something that has everything to do with the things that God's speaking to me. And it's just like it's so surround sound. And
Yes.
so going into Easter went with this just this awe and reverence
Right.
and desire to like just be still before God and to hear what he's speaking to me and going into this week. And I love that you're reading in Matthew because um the gospels are always a good thing to be reading,
Right.
but just like you're feeling it and you're hearing it and you're seeing it and you're seeing Jesus and what he was like the night before
Yeah.
he goes to the cross, when he's betrayed, when he's
Right.
praying with every pore in his body, saying, Lord, take this cup from me. But nevertheless, not what I will, but your will be done. Like it just changes how you see. And I'm just so grateful that God doesn't leave us where we're at. Like it's not like we get saved and then that's it. And there's no growth, there's no learning. There's not, it's like we're saved, but that's just the drop in the bucket of
Yeah.
everything that he wants to do in us and everything that he wants to do through us. And so leading up to Resurrection Sunday, which is the Sunday, it's like it's
Yes.
Super Bowl for us. It's like
Yes,
the
it is.
day. And to have, and we're having gatherings at our church on Good Friday also. And I just love the thought of like we'll be having communion together and we'll
Right.
be worshiping together and we'll be opening God's word together. And then we have Easter and it's just celebration and there's a solemnity to it,
Mm.
but there's
Right.
also such celebration. And like someone said, my husband is good with like knowing who exactly says things, but
Yes.
someone said that communion should be more of like cheers. Like, yes, there's a remembering that Jesus died, but then there's like the cheers effect of
Right. Yes.
what? What
Right.
is this life? Like,
Right.
Jesus died so that we could live and not just live in heaven one day, but live with purpose and
Right.
passion and power now.
Right. Right.
I'm
Yes.
so grateful.
That's so good. And I think really is leading up to Easter shows that Jesus is fully God and fully man. That
Yeah.
he feels what we're feeling when you lose a friend, like he was betrayed by the people who followed him so closely that he
Mm,
was afraid and all these things, but he did it without sin.
yeah.
And I think that's just so hopeful for us. This
Yeah.
he is fully man, that we're not walking through something that he hasn't yet experienced, but then he's also fully God, that he's in control. And then what you were
Exactly.
saying about just giving him a little bit, like he can use a little bit for the kingdom of God. Like we don't have to bring him this perfect, I'm put together self. It's
Yeah.
come to me who are weary and burdened, like just come broken to Jesus.
Amen.
And it actually went with exactly what you're saying of the thing keeps coming up. You hear it somewhere and you hear it at church and you hear it somewhere else and hear it. That happened with me with a mustard seed last week.
Wow.
It was me and my friend made these bracelets with mustard seeds on them, and they're like, "Oh, that's cute." And then it came up in my study when I was reading Matthew, and then a friend at the beach, she was just like, "For some reason, I keep hearing about a mustard seed," and I'm like, "You just brought it up to me again. I keep hearing about a mustard seed," and just that idea of like a little bit of faith God can use to go a long way. And I think that was just hopeful for me,
Yeah.
where sometimes it feels like if I don't have it all together or I'm struggling with something or I'm like, God, like what is happening here? It's like I just need to have a little bit of faith. And
Yes.
God is going to use that and preserve that and use it for anything more than I can ever imagine in my
I
own life.
love
So I
that.
think that is just something else that's just been sweet to reflect on as we lead up to Easter. Just
It's
a
so
little bit
good.
of faith can go a long way.
Yeah, and it's not like God is like, Oh man, here she comes with her little bit of faith again.
Yes,
He's like, "Oh gosh, no, but
right.
I only have this much to work with." It's like, no, I think it excites him because I think he knows our frame. He knows that we're human. He knows that we're weak. He knows that we're frail. He knows that our spirit is willing, but that
Yeah,
our flesh is weak. And for
yeah,
us just to offer something to him, like, God, I'm weak, but I know that you can do something with this, or I know that you can do something with this little bit of faith. Like, I think he gets excited about that because he's like, yes,
yeah,
yes. And I want you to grow in that. And I want you to grow in that. And so I'm just grateful that it's not like he's looking down on us with the furrowed brows, like, it really bumming me out with this tiny bit of faith that you keep coming
yes,
with me at. But it's
that's
like, no, you just keep coming, just keep coming,
right.
just keep coming.
That's so good. I read something in a book this week that was talking about that. It's like, when did we get the idea that God is looking at us with such disappointment?
Yeah.
It's like, remember, we're going to fall short, and that breaks his heart. Yes. When we're sinning against God, that breaks his heart.
Yeah.
He has like rightful anger and righteous anger, and it's like correct.
Yeah.
But he also isn't like pointing a finger at us saying, "Oh, I got to move on to the next girl. She messed up too many times." It's like, no, she's just
Yeah.
show up with a little bit, and he'll use that to make your cup overflow. And what does
Amen.
it look like to live out of an overflow of Jesus, not to earn his favor, not to earn these things, but just out of the overflow of love for him. This has
Yeah.
been so good. Thank you so
So
much
good.
for coming on. I'm just like soaking it all in. Um, I just love this idea. I feel like I'm going to be thinking about this shepherd, this idea of the shepherd all week.
Mhm.
Just even him leading up to the cross, he was still leading so well. And
Yeah.
on the cross, I mean, he was talking to the one of the people beside him, but he was like, "Oh, please forgive me." Like, he was still a shepherd until he
Yes.
died.
That's
And so,
beautiful.
yeah, and then don't
He's a
leave
good
Jesus in the
shepherd.
lake. He is. This is so good. Well, thank you for coming on again. And just I encourage everybody listening just to, well, you said read Psalm 23, right?
Yeah, I'd say read it, memorize it, like print it out, put it
Yeah,
on your mirror or it's just one of those chapters in the Bible that's like always brings comfort. Like I was visiting a couple and the husband was dying
yeah,
and I was praying for them and um like just to be able to pray Psalm 23 and
right.
not have to like not that it's bad to look it up in your Bible, it is great. But like just to have that always on your heart, I feel like is always been helpful for me.
That's
So,
so good. And then make sure you listen to Jennie and her husband's podcast. Hey, it's Lusko's. And if you're in Montana, go to church.
yes, come visit
So,
us. Well, Sophie, I just want to thank you for having me and I'm just so proud of you and your voice is beautiful in how you speak but also in what you're speaking and you're a deep well and I just I pray God's blessing on you and this last year of high school and all that you seek to do for the Lord that he would just bless you and give you favor and wisdom and just it was really an honor to get to talk with you today.
thank you. It was such an honor. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.